So we went to Texas and we said, Texas, you've been violating international law. And Texas said, go f yourself.
Yep.
And that's how that
rightfully so. But listen, I have been reliably told by a bunch of people with the exact same legal background as me, which is zero, that this is a grotesque violation of international law. And so this is going to diminish the United States stature. Okay. Could you talk for a minute? Like, I've seen 3 or 4 different type laws specifically. In fact, I won't say specifically, generically suggested violations of international law. Can you talk a little about just international law in general in situations like this, and then anything you want to talk about the specifics of what you've heard people suggesting this would violate?
So what people are talking about is that in the UN Charter, there's basically a guarantee that we made it illegal post-World War II for countries to aggress on other countries. That's what the law says. We're going to circle back to that. But even if you take that law at 100% face value, which I'll do for the moment, it has an exception, which is called Article 51, which is self-defense. And if you listen to what Trump was saying about these drug boats for months and months and months and months and months, he was talking about the drugs being a form of terrorism against the United States and invoking our right of self-defense. Why was he doing that, especially in retrospect? Well, now he has a clean runway from an international law perspective. So that would be the argument in terms of international law. It won't matter at all. And here's why. International law is enforced by 2 bodies as a legal matter. The UN and the International Court, the ICC, which is governed by the Rome Statute. Let's talk about each of them. In the UN, there's the General Assembly, which has no power to do anything under any circumstances ever. So let's rule them out. Then there's UN peacekeeping forces, which are governed by the Security Council. And China, Russia, and the United States are permanent members of the Security Council with veto power over anything the Security Council does. So there is no universe in which the UN can ever move against the United States for a perceived violation of international law, flat stop. It is impossible because the US will just veto it. Same with Russia, same with China. People have this false impression that international law was designed to create a system of co-equal countries that all operated like the same way we would in our legal system. This is just not true. What it was designed to do was to keep the great powers from fighting each other and to create a system which would let the great powers operate within their spheres of influence and reduce chaos. There is no mechanism where this could get enforced. Any violation of international law could get enforced against the US, basically at all. And the ICC is even funnier. We can get to that in a second.
So just to clarify something to my audience that's saying I've changed my opinion. I have not. I still do not like this. Talking about it from a legal perspective and saying what good I want to come out after it is different than saying that all of a sudden I think that this was something I liked that occurred. I've been clear on that. I was also clear on the... This is an aside, but different types of shows for different types of arguments, right? Like, for example, oftentimes what we're doing on this show is like outlining a legal case or outlining the political fault lines that exist. That's different than us just straight up saying, yep, this is what I want. Yep, this is what I think. So stay tuned. I guess I'll talk more about my individual feelings on it. But yeah, international law, it's always been a joke. And the people that like the way that it's sort of proffered, and not you put it more articulately than me, but I'll just put it crudely like this. It's so interesting how selective the people that want to apply international law are, right? If you have a moral framework that says something like this, well, a nation's sovereignty is sacrosanct. You can't interfere with that. There's nothing you can do. Watch how quickly that changes for people. The people that say that will be upset about this had no problem with U.S. violating the sovereignty of Syria. We weren't in Syria to depose Assad. We were in Syria to fight ISIS. We just wouldn't leave. And imagine if another country would do that to the United States, where it was like China's like, we're here to fight like white supremacist gangs. We're here to fight them. Also, we don't like you, but we're just here to fight them. Trust, come on, that would be considered a violation of active sovereignty. So you're exactly right. What it is the great powers set this system up to resolve disputes, and it's almost like we were talking before the show, it's almost the exact opposite of what people say. Oh, it's to put every country on equal footing. No, quite literally, it was to enshrine that the powerful countries like could keep their position without necessarily having to militaristically attack each other. So you have all these like Cold War era, you have all these like proxy war type situations. It would be different, I assure you, and the international community would treat it differently if it was like the United States took the head of Spain. Right? Like that would be completely different, but it's not. Spain's in the in group, Venezuela's in the out group, and so that's the way it's going to be looked at. And furthermore, claims of international law, not only is there no teeth, but it's also farcical in many senses. Like international law, when it comes at loggerheads with the Constitution of the United States, I think should be correctly dispelled with. I just don't care.
Can I tell you a funny story about it's a tangent, but if you don't mind me doing a tangent, I did a death penalty case a long time ago. My client was totally innocent, but he had been on death row in Texas for 40 years. And the way this case came to my old firm was that Texas had been arresting Mexicans and they'd been violating a treaty when they did it. And my firm went to International Court of Justice and argued that Texas had been violating international law. And my firm won, my old firm. The International Court of Justice said, yes, Texas has been violating international law. They were supposed to notify Mexico when they arrested these Mexicans, and they didn't. So then we took that to the U.S. Supreme Court. And we said, U.S. Supreme Court, the International Court of Justice said Texas has been violating the law. They've been violating international law. What are you going to do about it? And they said, I take your point. We think they have been violating international law. Go tell Texas about that. So we went to Texas and we said, Texas, you've been violating international law. And Texas said, go fuck yourself.
Yep.
And that's how that
rightfully so. Rightfully so.
That's actually how America views international law, if you're going to be honest about it, right? Now, my guy was innocent as hell, and we fought like hell, and we got him off death row, and that's another story. Crazy story. In fact, it's like a Pulp Fiction story. I mean, at one point, there was a detective in Mexico who had abducted his family and literally put like the car battery on his dad's testicles and was like, then they phoned America and was like, if you don't confess, we're gonna start torturing your dad. And that's how, and like this is all in court documents, like this is all proof. So it was a crazy, obviously he should not have been in jail. But in terms of international law, that's how it goes. And there's no better example of this than sometimes people say stuff like Bush is a war criminal, we should arrest Bush. Trump's a war criminal, we should arrest Trump. Biden's a war criminal even. They're all war criminals, arrest them. And there's this really funny law that I encourage everyone to look up. It's called the American Service Members Protection Act. And if anybody wants to talk to you about arresting Americans by the ICC, this is the thing to point out. We passed a law in this country that says if an American is ever arrested by the ICC, because we are not a party to that treaty, they have no jurisdiction to arrest Americans. If they ever arrest an American, the president has standing authorization to invade Europe and by all necessary means take the Americans back. That's what we think of the international court. Like we are not beholden to them, and we shouldn't be. This is America's view of all these institutions. We do not let international bodies tell us what to do. This is the mistake Europe made. In Europe, when they sign a treaty, it's binding law. They're bound by it. In America, we like to keep international law separate from our legal system for good reason. And I don't think we're wrong to do it. But the idea that any president's going to be arrested for war crimes is laughable. It's a joke.
So the two things I have to say about it, right? One, the international law I hear the most, and when I'm debating, is asylum law. Mm-hmm. Wow, you can't turn away these asylees. You can't turn. I don't care about that. I don't care what the ICC says about that. I don't care what the EU says about that. If we in the United States say we want to set our own immigration policy, and that means we're not going to accept people that claim that they are seeking asylum, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with saying we don't care. Then fine, send your military after us, ICC. How about you take these people? That's number one. Number two is, just think of it from simple game theory. So, look at the position of the United States circa, 1990, after the Cold War, right? United States, clear hegemon. You don't think that the international community, if it was, a pure one-for-one vote, wouldn't have incentive to be like, well, let's take them down a peg, right? Like, we can't do it economically, we can't do it militaristically, but we'll all go together, and it doesn't even matter if we're morally right. We'll just say, actually, United States, you have to listen to us, and there's more of us than you. And we're not going to do it in like a just way. We're going to do it in an advantageous way in game theory for us. So, of course, it would make no sense for the United States to say, sure, I guess if the international community says that, for example, something as simple as this, if the international community says that our companies, such as X or the New York Times, can't operate in their countries as long as we have, quote, free speech. Well, that's international law. We have to abide by that. Of course not. We'd say that's the First Amendment for a reason. We don't care. You don't get to do that to us. You don't get to try to say that we're violating international law by allowing hate speech. So, yeah, I have no time of day for these claims of international law. Are there things that I think that international law proclaims that we should follow? Of course, but not necessarily because they're international law, because I find them morally virtuous. Like, we shouldn't just torture surrendering prisoners for the heck of it, and things like that. Of course, even if we would never be, sanctioned by an international court, we shouldn't do that because it's wrong. But it's not because, the international court tells us to.
And I'm not saying international law does nothing. It actually does quite a good deal. Like what public international law does is for the non-great powers, like, if you're a small country in Africa or South America and you start invading your neighbor, the UN actually will show up with peacekeeping forces and make you stop, right? Like for smaller non-great powers, this is enforceable. So that's different. For the great powers, it's what you were talking about right now, which is it's a valuable rhetoric tool for gathering sympathy and for mobilizing shame, right? So when Russia invades Ukraine, we know we can't use the Security Council, but we're going to say, look, they violated the UN Charter, they violated international law, and Russia's going to say, no, we didn't. And that's going to be the conversation that either gets people to be sympathetic or not, right? With Venezuela, this is a bad guy. He did bad things. Now, what's the enforcement mechanism for the US? It's going to be whether or not China does something about this, like, because they're the communist power. Are they going to sanction us? Are they going to make a diplomatic fuss out of this? That would be the enforcement mechanism. And that's the truth. Like China hasn't invaded Taiwan, not because it's illegal. They haven't invaded Taiwan because we've made it clear that we have a very serious problem with that.
Yes,
right?
I'm not going to listen. Let me make this as clear as possible. Despite the fact that I don't like what happened with what Trump did in Venezuela there, I'm not going to listen to international bodies that were perfectly fine with the deposing of Gaddafi in Libya tell me that this was somehow a violation of international law and that wasn't. Like, they have no credibility with me. I understand what the game is. The game is not, these are, serious people just trying to advocate for justice regardless of, wearing team colors. That's not what's going on. So I could dislike this action and still say international law has nothing to do with my criticism of this action whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's very, I understand people come into a show at different times and things of that nature, but make no mistake about it. You're allowed to support or dislike something and say, but part of the arguments that people were making, I completely disagree. So the international law portion of it, I just find it's silly. It's not going to do anything. You might as well be an old man screaming at the sky. Like it's not going to have any effect.
I think the people complaining fundamentally misunderstand your position. So let me just try to make this like very, very clear. This is not my politics, but if I put on your politics for a second, you're an anti-globalist and a non-interventionist, right?
Correct.
So you don't like intervention because you're a non-interventionist, and you don't like international law dictating what the U.S. does and doesn't do because you're not a globalist. So,
correct.
This is not, I don't think there's any contradiction in that position, right? You don't like it because of domestic political implications, not because of some kind of like international legal.
That is a great way to distill it.